Okay, so we'll take a little bit of time to sit and settle and try and move the chocolate thoughts out to the side a little bit. We'll just take a little time to settle ourselves. It's quite a sort of a slow class today. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. So tackling things in a slightly different order to perhaps we would normally take things, which means that muscles will be cooler and therefore the experience will be slightly different. And we'll slowly move from here back down to the floor. Going to use the block behind the back of the head and allow ourselves to ease down. Make sure the block isn't pressing into the neck or the shoulders. And we'll bring the feet together in towards the bottom. On the center line, we draw the right knee in towards the chest. Slide the left leg out. Let that lengthen out first. And we'll start to flex the foot a little bit. Gently internally rotate the thigh. And then we're going to start to use the arms to draw that right knee towards the right armpit. So it's kind of going out to the side a little bit and getting closer into the ribs. So if you look at the shape of the hip and pelvis, you can see why you're able to get a little bit more towards the ground as you take the knee out to the side, because that's where the space is. And then we'll draw the knees back in and swap over gently to the opposite side. So again, we'll just draw the knee in towards the chest first and then slide the right leg out down the center line. Let it lengthen out for a couple of breaths. And then we can start to flex and drive the heel away and turn the thigh in. And once that feels settled, we'll take that left knee towards the left armpit. Significantly easier than trying to take it the other way across the body, that's for sure. And we'll release from there as well. Bring the feet back in close towards the bottom, and we'll take the right leg up towards the sky, turn the toes out, bend the knee, bring that ankle to the outside of the thigh for figure four. So we're going to let the right knee drive forwards a little bit as we start to flex the foot. Come up onto the tiptoes of the left foot, draw the knee in towards the body, just use the leg muscles, and then slide the hands through. And because we're not warmed up, you might find that normally you're able to take hold of the shin, but today it's going to be the back of the thigh. If you've still got that flexibility, then great. But if you haven't, don't worry about it too much. Now we're going to flex both feet. Draw the left knee in, just using the leg muscles rather than the arms. So the shoulders and the arms are very relaxed in here. It's more for balance. Perhaps giving them something to do so they don't feel like they're being completely idle. And then we'll relax out of that. Take that to the sky. Do exactly the same on the opposite side. So we'll take the leg up, flex, rotate, bend, let the knee travel forwards a little. Come up onto the tiptoes. Use the strength of the leg to draw that back in. When you've got as far as you can still just start to feel that little squeeze coming on. You take the hands through. And then we flex both legs and both feet. And using the strength of that right leg to draw in. And then we'll release that out as well. And we'll take it into a little spiral twist. So take the arms out wide. Just let the legs drift over towards the right. Head to the left. Keep your shoulders on the ground. Try and keep the thighs relatively close together. So you're going to have to take a little bit more effort drawing that left thigh down. You might even want to use the hand to give it a little bit extra weight to assist. Normally when we do this, we let the legs just drift apart. We're trying to keep them together today, so it's working on the abductors and adductors a little bit differently. Release. Come back out. Cross over to side B. I'm going to take that right hand onto the chest, float it across and roll into the side of the body, and use the hands to press back up. Swing the feet out towards the back of the mat. We'll come into child's pose. We'll take the knees nice and wide, toes together, sit back slowly. Keeping the elbows off of the ground, we're going to walk the fingers forwards half an inch. You really start to feel the stretch down the lats. It's sort of a big muscle that runs across the back of your ribs, down towards the bottom of your spine, from the outer edge of your shoulders. And it feeds into the bottom of your arm, underneath your armpit. So that's where you're going to feel the stretch if you just let the fingers do the walking. We'll draw the belly in a little bit so that we make the breath a bit more in the chest. And that will emphasize the stretch even further. And then we'll take the hands over to the right for a little side bend. So we'll do our best to have the hands shoulder distance apart. So have a little look-see. we'll lift up, walk across to the opposite side, and then ease down. Okay, let's breathe in those deep breaths. And we'll come back into the center. We're going to come straight down onto our bellies for low cobra. So elbows on the ground, bring the knees back in, and then lengthen them away. And as you bring yourself down gently to the floor, we'll bring the hands quite a lot further down than we normally do. Normally I say underneath the shoulders, but today I'm going to go for down by the bottom of ribs. And I'm going to squeeze the elbows together. So you can start to feel the shoulders working already. Boot laces are down, feet are about hip distance apart. We'll inhale up and exhale down. I'm just trying to keep that little bit of effort in the shoulders drawing back and the elbows into the center of the spine the whole time. So you keep that little contraction going on the inhale and the exhale. Just as regular low cobra, very little weight in the hands. Pretty much keeping that bottom rib on the floor as we lift. Getting a nice long spine. We'll come up one more time. And then let ourselves come back down. And take a little breath from there. Allow ourselves to just take the hands out a little further so we can lift from the floor to come back up onto all fours, and we'll come into down dog. So we just draw the shoulders back a little bit so there's a safe place, and then take ourselves into that first big opening of the back of the legs. Just walking them out gently, making sure the hands have no gaps under them. Bring the belly in, lifting the hips high, gradually easing into those shoulders. Now we're going to take a scissor dog here, so we'll take the right leg up, keep the shoulders square to the ground, but turn the hips out a little bit, and lengthen that back leg up towards the sky. You actually spread the toes out on the raised foot, so you can feel everything engage in the leg. One more breath. Rotate the hips, bring the foot gently back down to the floor, and we'll take it to the second side. Just opening out a little bit. Be careful that this right arm doesn't bend down towards the floor. You end up with a sort of one arm, one leg contribution going on. And try to keep the shoulders square to the ground. And just spread out through those toes. Lengthen the leg away. Feel it get a little longer, maybe a little higher. And then we'll rotate the hips, bring the foot back down. We'll come into a plank as we breathe in. Roll over the toes. Sit back onto the heels. Head to the ground. Round spine, lift up. So it's almost like we're doing cat-cow. And then draw the chest forwards so it really does look like cat-cow. And draw the belly back in, let the spine raise. Sit back onto the heels. Elbows and head to the ground. Nice breath in, drawing the belly in as you do, rounding through the spine. Letting the chest come forwards, exhaling all the way back. We'll take that one more time, forwards and back. And then we'll slide ourselves forwards on the elbows again. Take the feet towards the back of the mat. Bring the chest to the ground. Take the hands out a little bit to the side, down by the hips. Feet are hip distance apart, bootlaces down. It's a locust pose. And just upper body. So I'm going to lengthen the chest and the hands away from the floor. Exhale down. Inhaling out. We're careful to lengthen the back of the neck away from the pelvis rather than pulling it up and back. So it's actually being triggered, this lift, from the lower back muscles and the mid back muscles. We'll take one more of these and then we'll go to the full version. Where we take the thighs away from the ground, the chest and the hands in equal measure. We'll come up 2 more times. The last one. As you come down, bring your hands back underneath your chin, elbows out nice and wide. Wriggle out the hips a little bit from side to side. And then we're going to gently bend the right knee and bring the heel in towards the sitting bone, taking the right hand back. Just use the hand to help draw that in a little bit. Now press the hips and the thighs into the floor, and the knee actually lengthens away towards the bottom of the mat. So it's half frog pose. No jokes about rivets. And then we'll release that leg. Swap over to the other side. And to lengthen the leg away. Drive the hip and the thigh positively into the floor. And then release. We're going to come into bow pose, so we'll bend both legs, bring the heels in, take the hands back, find the ankles. Once you've done that, just make sure that the thighs are more or less parallel to each other. So I might need to wriggle them in a little bit more. Chest is on the floor, chin's on the ground. First of all, lengthen the knees away. Flex the ankles, number 2. Allow yourself to let the chest lift away from the floor a little bit. So drawing the chest up and forwards as you press the thighs down. Take a breath here, and then you're going to press the shin bones away, keeping the knees on the ground, thighs on the floor. You get a little bit more height in the chest. And then on the next exhale, we're going to press the soles of the feet to the sky and let the thighs lift off the ground. And then we can release back down again. We'll bring the hands gently underneath the chin and roll out the hips a little from side to side. We're going to come back up slowly. So we'll bring the hands down to the bottom of the ribs, shoulders back. Press gently into the floor. Take your time to lift up so your spine has, well, the back muscles have a little bit of time to adjust from flexion to extension. and vice versa. We'll let the knees take a little further apart. We'll sit back onto the heels gently. We're doing this nice and slowly, deliberately, and then easing our way down into that child's pose. So from the contraction of the glutes and the lower back muscles, we're now lengthening them all out. And that's quite a lot of hard work for those muscles. So we're just taking a little bit of time. Make sure everything feels happy. Everything knows where it's going and moving to. Okay, we'll come back up onto all fours. And we're going to come into the low pigeon pose, which bring the knees together first of all on the center line, making sure the knees are underneath the hips. I'll start with the left leg. I'm going to take that knee to the outside of the left wrist and bring the heel under the groin. I'm going to slowly use the toes of my right foot to feed that back a little bit. So you're already starting to kind of roll off of the shin bone on that front leg. You're getting a little bit more into the side of the calf and the hip opening. So once you've walked that out as far as you can, you're going to see how far forwards you can take your hands shoulder distance apart. Now we're trying to get to a point where we can get the body very low to the ground and that we're keeping the chest and the body square, so both shoulders are the same height from the floor. It's easy to collapse over to the side if you're not careful. You press the hands into the floor and push back a little bit. And as you do, lengthen the toes of your right foot, the one that's right at the bottom of the mat, as far away as you can. You'll feel that in the hip and the knee a little bit differently on the front leg. If there's any sharp pains, let yourself just ease off of the pressing. But otherwise, it's a little press and a little lengthen, keeping the belly in, keeping ourselves square to the floor. Now, we're purposely not letting the body lie completely on the ground. We're just keeping it a fraction off so that we're working rather than resting. It might look like we're having a nice time, but there should be some heat getting generated in parts of the body. We'll walk the fingers back in, and then you can start to take some bigger movements with the hands once the shoulders feel a little bit more confident. And then we'll just ease ourselves back into that tabletop, but with the knees together on the center line. And then once we're ready, we'll take the right knee out, heel under the center line of the body, walking the left foot away, say rolling off of the shin a little bit into the side of the calf. So you're dropping this hip bone down closer and closer to the floor. And then again, we walk the fingers forwards. They need to be at least shoulder distance apart or a fraction wider. Come down slowly so you know that you're safe and you feel the tension in the joints. And if it all feels okay, then you press into the hands and you lengthen that opposite leg away. Hover just a little off the ground. So the shoulders are still doing work. Core muscles are still doing a little lifting as well. The idea is that the hips are actually square to the ground as well, in terms of the depth that the hips are off of the ground, which is why we're giving that little bit of effort to keep ourselves high so we don't roll off to the side. As your body becomes a little more elastic, you might find there's even more length, more space. And then we use the fingers again to walk in. We'll let ourselves ease back. Okay, now we're going to tuck the toes underneath and just bring the hands back. So we're going to lift the knees away from the floor. going to be in a little bit of a squat. Going to find the block, have it just in front. I have it on the sort of the high side in front of me. We're going to take a little forward fold. Let the back of the legs open out. Now take the block whilst I'm here and just bring that between the ankles. Have it just an inch or so off the ground. So having to press the ankles together to stop the block falling onto the floor. Now I'm going to bend the knees forwards. Allow myself to sit the bottom down a little bit. Take the hands gently away from the floor so I come into chair pose. Keeping that block off of the floor. Gives you something else to concentrate about in chair pose. And then we're going to let the body lift up. Going to keep the block in place. And then float the hands out and up. Arms touch. And we come back down. So we're going to try and keep those arms nice and straight and try not to take them too far forward. They're really making an effort to go out to the side, keeping the belly drawn in, the ribs down. I'll take that one more time. So we've got the hang of that. We're going to take it up a little level. Let ourselves lift up onto the tiptoes. Take the hands up. Try and keep the heels off the ground and the block in place. Not as easy as it sounds. I'm trying to lift the arms about the same speed as we did before. I'm going to take one more lift. And then as we bring the hands down, we'll let the heels come to the floor very gently. And let that shake out. We'll move the block out to the side. And we're going to take a standing balance pose. So if you know that you prefer to use a wall for your balances, then by all means do. And just check that there's anything around you be moved out of the way, so if you need to step out quick, you can. So bring the toes together, but have a little bit of gap for the heels. So the feet are pointing forwards, not out to the side. They're pointing the same direction as these hip bones on the front. Bring the hand in towards the heart. It's a standing balance on one leg, and we're going to extend the other leg out directly in front of us once we hold the big toe. That's the theory. So we're going to weight into the left leg. Draw the right knee up. Now we start off with it coming up to about the height of the hip, but obviously our arms aren't long enough to reach the toes, and we want to limit the amount of leaning forwards that we have. So I'm going to take the knee out to the side a little bit and lift the foot even higher and see if I can gently get my fingers around the big toe. Index finger, middle finger. We'll take the opposite hand out to the side to help the balance, and then slowly extend the leg out in front. So hopefully as straight as we can, following the line of the hips. Draw the right shoulder back a little bit. Press down into the standing leg. Try to lean forward as little as possible. Release. Bring the foot back. And hopefully it lands somewhere close to the other foot. Take a moment just for the hips to kind of settle themselves a bit. Hands come into the heart. very useful to find a point to focus on. Keep your eyes really trained on there rather than letting them dance around. I'm going to take the weight into the right leg. Find a balance in the foot. And then let the knee travel out and high. So it's very like that pose we did on the floor at the beginning. Slowly find the toes, try not to grab. Take the hand out to the side for a little bit more balance. Let the spine lift up into a straight line and then lengthen the leg out. And trying to have the toes pointing out towards the sky. So you might need to rotate the thigh in a little as well. Oops. Starting to wobble. There we go. Didn't mean to do that, honest. Last breath. Oh, it's the end of the 10 weeks. My legs are tired. That's what I'm going to stay with. Right. So hopefully didn't quite cartwheel around as much as I did. Back towards the front of the mat. Take the feet about hip distance apart. Bring your hands into the heart. I'm going to giggle all through the rest of this now. Take it to the right. Have a nice big step out. Both legs. Use all of the mat space that we've got. We'll take the arms out into those nice little star shapes. We'll turn the toes towards the front of the mat, so both feet turn. We'll sink into the front knee, into our warrior two. Just check the front knee is pointing forwards. And we'll slowly extend out, as if we're going to come into extended side angle. But I'm going to drop the front hand down onto the front of the shin. I'm going to wrap the rear hand around towards the hip and the thigh. And then once I've done that, I'm going to straighten the front leg. So it's triangle pose. The body perhaps a little higher than sometimes we enter into this pose, but it's still a very valid version. And it allows us to get used to turning the chest around to the side more easily. Press down through both feet, squeezing the thighs together a little bit. So it's like you're trying to draw the scissors back together. Soften the front knee. Bring ourselves back into our warrior two. Take a little breath. Bring the hands directly above the shoulders. We're going to rotate and spin on the back foot. So come on to the ball of the foot. Slowly lengthen forwards. Bring the hands to the floor and we'll step it into a forward fold. And we'll bring the hands onto the hips. And let ourselves lift up, softening the knees, flat back. Bring the hands into the heart. We'll step it out to the left. Take the feet nice and wide again. Open up into our star. Turn the toes on both feet towards the front of the mat. Sink into our warrior two. And start to extend out. Wrap that arm around the back towards the hip. Front hand onto the top of the shin, just underneath the knee. And then slowly open the leg out. So there is a sense of pressing down more into the ball of the foot on the front leg than pressing down with the whole of the foot. I'm going to push down and away a little bit. Sense that you're drawing your thighs together, so sucking the thighs back into the center of the body. Soften the front knee. Come back into a warrior two. Bring the hands up high. Rotate slowly. Extend forwards. Bring the hands to the floor. Stepping into that forward fold. One more breath here. And bring the hands onto the hips. And let ourselves lift up. Bring the hands in towards the heart. Take a little breath. Come out to the right again. Come into our star. Turn the feet for warrior two. Bring the hands high. And then we'll let the hands come down onto the inside of the front leg. Fingers around to the long side of the mat. Head and the toes in a little more if they're not quite in the right position. And then we're going to take the hands a little wider than the shoulders. We're going to walk the fingers forwards and try to get a nice line between the hips, fingers, and the shoulders. So to do that, we need to lift the sitting bones up a little bit, press the feet into the floor, get the hands forwards, and let the chest sink a little bit. I want to try and keep the weight even in the feet. So you want to be able to press evenly down rather than pressing into the sides of the feet. You'll get more lift on the inner thigh in your feet. Press down in a more uniform way into the floor, and it'll take the pressure out of the ankles. Also make you breathe faster, by apparently. Okay, now I'm going to bring the hands back in. I'm going to walk the fingers around to the front of the mat, into a lunge. Now take a little breath from there, and allow the back knee to come down to the floor. Now bring both hands on the inside of that front foot again, and just turn the front foot out about 45 degrees. So the knee's starting to hang out to the side. I'm also going to take my right hand now just a little bit off the mat to the side, untucking the toes on the back foot. I'm going to bring my hand gently onto the inside of the left thigh, and I'm going to sink the right hip down to the floor and start to let the hip roll down to the ground. So gently get to a position where the hip sits on the floor. Flex the bottom foot and press out through the heel. And you might need to wiggle your front foot back a little bit further. This is strong in the front shoulder. Down the side of the body. It's a big stretch. It might look like I'm just resting, but my hip is hovering off the ground, so pretty much holding myself off of the floor with my shoulder, stretching out the hip, and bring the hands back to the floor, spin everything back in, bring myself back into a nice regular lunge, take a breath, step the legs forwards into that forward fold, and let the hips sink down into the ground. And feet press away. So it's a nice loose feeling in that forward fold. And we'll take that to the second side. Bring the hands onto the hips, soften knees, flat back to lift. Bring the hands in towards the heart. Take the feet out nice and wide. Come into our star. Ease into our warrior two. Flow the hands high. Ease them down onto the inside of the front leg. Walk the fingers around to the long side, turn the toes in. And this time we're going to see if we can walk the hands underneath the body, so hinging over the hips, and taking the hands towards the opposite side that we started. Try and let the head hang rather than pulling on the neck. Again, try to get that sense of pressing into the feet that we had before evenly. So pressing down, it helps open up the back of the legs naturally and supports the groin. Walk the hands forwards again. Lift the body up halfway. Walk the fingers around to the front of the mat. And come into that lunge. Make a little bit of space. Drop the back knee down. Turn the front foot out to the sides a little bit. And move the left hand just off of the mat. Kind of got one thumb still sitting there, just for a little bit of grip. And bring the right hand gently onto that thigh on the front leg and let the knee hang out for a moment. So we know where we're going, and we also know that it's quite strong as well. We take a little breath from here and start to almost collapse down. So you might need to move the front foot back a little bit to give yourself some space. I certainly do. And then we lengthen out through the long leg. That foot is flexed, pressing out through the heel. And then we'll bring the hands forwards again and lift ourselves up. And adjust the foot back into a lunge-like position. Lift the knee, take a little breath, and step into the forward fold. Again, we hang, nice loose hips, press into the feet. Just breathe easy down. Bring the hands onto the hips again. Let ourselves lift up. Whew. And we're back to another balancing pose. So again, same situation. Make sure the floor is nice and safe for us. Bring the toes together. Now we're going to come into tree pose, but we're going to keep it to the low level. So we're just going to, I'll explain that in a minute. And we're moving from tree to kite pose. It's a nice natural progression, and it will work the legs pretty strong. What we're trying to do though is, if you can imagine that at the moment that your belly button is kind of exactly over the center between your 2 feet. When we move into the pose, you want to try and keep your belly button in that same place and not let it drift out to the side, because that means you're just sitting into the hip joint, and we want to be pulling everything back in and using the muscles to work on our balance and strength. So we'll bring the hands in towards the heart. We'll shift into the left leg. Immediately everyone's thinking about where their belly buttons have gone. We take the right heel onto the ankle and just turn the toes out to the side. Now, once you've found your balance, we're going to bring the foot gently onto the side of the calf and the shin. And once you've found your balance there, we'll take the hands out wide into a nice big Y shape, palms facing forwards. And then we're going to point the toes of the right leg out to the side to a strong thigh. You can feel the muscles around the knees lifting. We're just trying to keep that big toe off the ground. And remember, we're trying to keep the belly button over the center line where we started. So think about that and bring yourself back into the center. So you don't want to have your foot too far off the ground. Really feel your leg muscles trying so hard to bring yourself back. My big toe is continually bouncing and lifting and bouncing and lifting. I can feel my thighs burning away. Maybe that's just the radiator behind me, not sure. Last breath. Bring the foot in. See how much your belly button travels back. That's the telltale sign. Okay, whew, that's strong on the legs. Bring the hands back in towards the heart again. Let's find our focus point. Load into the right leg. Think about belly buttons. Heels and ankles touch. The toes point out to the side. We'll square ourselves up to the front of the mat. When you're ready, let's see if we can lift the foot away from the floor. And then when we feel good, we take the hands out wide. That's Y shape. Point the toes down. Extend the leg out. Still trying to get your belly button to that same starting place. Oh, so close. And it moves away. And your toe touches the floor. And you start again. And then we'll bring everything back. Whew. It's tough on the shoulders as well as the legs. We'll come back into the front of the mat. We're coming down to the floor. We'll take one vinyasa. And so that is forward fold, step it back into a down dog, plank, half plank up dog. You knew it would be there somewhere, back into down dog. Inhale high, hands into the heart. Exhale over, nice and slow. Feel the difference in your legs now, just after doing that simple posture. We'll take the right and the left leg back into our down dog. Let's got those hips nice and high. Float into a plank as we breathe in. Push forwards on the tippy toes. Bring the elbows into the ribs. Don't come down too low. Turn the bootlaces down. Strong legs lengthen out. Breathe in as you open the chest. Roll it back into your down dog. One more breath here. And then we'll come forward and let the knees come to the ground. Sitting back onto the heels with our block. Come into Dandasana. And lifting the legs out in front. Roll the shoulders back. Out through the heels. We'll come into Janu Shirshasana. So we'll bring the heel into the groin, knee to the side. Let it sink down. We'll turn the hips square. Keep the foot pointing out towards the sky and the long leg as we bring the hands onto the top of the shin, putting a micro bubble bend in the knee. Get space in the spine, lifting the hips up, and then fold those hips over the thigh. Allow yourself to sink in gently. I'm going to keep the hands on the shins somewhere, so we're not reaching forwards. We are able to keep the elbows out nice and wide. There's plenty of space to breathe. And then we'll use the hand to press back and lengthen out. Take it to side two. Ourselves up. Hands onto the shin. Get space around the hips and the spine. Draw forwards. Don't worry about where you get to. Just feel it. If you end up in a different place, That's fine, as long as you're still on the mat. We use the hands to lift again, nice and easy. We'll come off of the block, take that behind, gently roll down. So we're going to take the hands around the back of the thighs, just behind the kneecaps, and draw the knees in towards the body. So it's a hug, but it's a very, very low level hug. The back is nice and flat to the floor. And the reason we're taking the back of the thighs is that two things. One, if you're able to draw the legs out and down far enough, you can get the back of your arms onto the ground. And secondly, we won't put any strain into the knees. As we do this, we're not affecting the joint at all. Just working on the hips and the glutes and the lower back muscles. Now, I'm using quite a bit of effort to draw the legs down to get my back of my arms on the floor. Appreciate that you might need to take the legs out a little wider. That's not a problem. And then release. Now we're going to let the feet come to the floor close to the bottom, take the arms out wide. We'll shimmy the hips over towards the left a little bit and roll the legs down to the right. Hit the opposite way, and this time we're going to relax completely. And slowly bring ourselves back up. Shimmy across the opposite side. And we'll ease the legs back up. And we'll come into our final Shavasana. So hands a little closer to the side of the body. Slide a heel out to each corner of the mat. A little wriggle and jiggle. And then just let ourselves sink onto the mat. So begin to stretch the fingers and toes. Breathe a little deeper. And let us just have a nice stretch out. Draw the heels in. Find a little hug. And we'll carefully roll onto our right side. Take a breath. Use the exhale to lift gently away from the floor. Bring ourselves back up. Hands into the heart as we take a breath in. And let the chin drop. As we exhale, drawing the belly in, bowing to the floor to seal the practice. Let the breath come back in slowly to build the spine for us. As we open the eyes, namaste. Thank you for joining me. Hope you enjoyed a slightly slower version of Dynamic Class. Take care, and I'll see you soon.